Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our DL Town Hall here. We're just going to give it a few more minutes just to get everyone rolled in this morning, and we'll get things started, okay?
I think we've got most of the people logged in now. There's a few more trickling in, but we'll kick off our annual dedicated locator town hall. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. It's been a really interesting and successful 2026 with dedicated locator as we have expanded throughout the industry and are seeing more usage of the model throughout. And certainly we're going to go into some of that information today, and we've got a really good lineup of topics to discuss and some people to talk about those topics today. So thank you very much for attending. There will be a couple opportunities to ask some questions, and Marco is going to go through some of the housekeeping in just a moment. But certainly, thank you for being here, and we look forward to a really great 2026. But it always starts off with setting ourselves up in the right way, and certainly opportunities like this for us to talk about what we have seen in the past year, what we're looking to see in the next year, and for you to have the opportunity to ask us those questions so you can set yourselves up in the most appropriate way are the best ways for us to go forward, set ourselves off on the right foot. So I'm going to hand it over to Marco Detor, and he's going to kick us off for today's dedicated locator town hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Now, before we dive in, just a quick housekeeping notes here. Today's session is being recorded. The full recording will be posted to both our Ontario One Call YouTube channel and our webpage. Feel free to revisit any of those to cover today and what we have shared with this team today. To help us keep things running smoothly, we'll be using the Q&A function throughout the session. So you'll see under your top left-hand corner, there should be a Q&A function. If you have any questions based on, throughout the session, you can type in your question there. Or when we come to the period of the Q&A portion, you can also use the raise hand function, and we'll bring forward, your questions at that point and unmute yourself. We want this session to be informative and interactive and engaging, so don't hesitate to participate, and your insight and questions will make this town hall valuable for everyone. Now, before we move on to our 2026 update, we want to begin with, begin ways we always do, by grounding ourselves in safety. Safety is the foundation of dedicated locator program and the work we support in every single day. So it shapes our processes, our cultures, and the way we serve in the industry. To kick things off, I'd like to hand it over to someone we all know well, Lucas Young, our HR generalist, who will be leading us through today's safety meeting. Lucas, take it over.
Good morning, everybody. I will be talking through our safety minute today. It's going to be on slips, trips, and falls and winter driving. We're hoping we're on the right side of the winter peak, but it's important to stay vigilant until that groundhog can't see its shadow anymore. So first things first, a couple quick facts about slip incidents. Most folks tend to picture them as an issue that they only need to worry about once they've entered their senior years, but the truth is that they're a threat for any age. So first things first, slips and fall accidents are related to 40% of all injury-related hospital admissions. They're responsible for 60% of all injury-related emergency room visits. Fall-related accidents have been increasing every single year since 2017. And the rates of fall-related injuries are 3 times higher in the winter, which we are all unfortunately still in. And specifically, January and February are the annual peak of falling injuries. So a couple quick tips for walking when you know it's icy out. First, and most obviously, just keep your eyes open. Walking distracted will have you falling very, very quickly. Next, try to keep your hands free. That means be wary of what you're holding and keep your hands out of your pockets anytime you're worried that there might be a falling hazard. Make sure you got your proper footwear on and keep them clean when you come inside, because otherwise you'll be inside, think you're safe, and not realize that you've tracked a puddle indoors and slip on that. Tell others when there's a slip-in hazard. Tell your coworkers, your friends, your families, hey, be careful out there. It's icy out and you gotta be careful. Walk like a penguin. That basically means walk low and walk slow with big, wide feet to be careful as you go. And lastly, it's obvious, but salt and gravel keeps both you and your visitors safe on your property. For winter driving, first and arguably most importantly, give yourself some extra time. Getting places just takes longer in the winter, and driving fast to make up for it will get you in trouble very, very quickly. Secondly, prepare your vehicle, winter tires, emergency roadside kits. These are things that you think that you don't need until you really, really wish that you had them. Take some time to fully clear off your car before you drive. Taking a few extra minutes to do this will prevent snow from falling on your windshield when you're driving, suddenly blocking your view at bad times like when you're on the highway. And finally, adapt your driving. Go slow, be careful on turns, stop early, and lastly, just make sure you drive extra defensively. You know, you might be a clever person that knows how to drive safe in the snow, but we all know that that can't be said for everyone in Canada. So watch out for yourself and watch out for others. And thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Marco.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for that. All right, can you guys see my screen again? Perfect.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Now, for anyone joining us for the first time here, for those, and also for those who could use a quick refresher, let's talk about what dedicated locator actually is and what this model has become such a valuable solution for a complex project. At its core, the dedicated locator model improves locate delivery by assessing one locate resource to handle all underground infrastructure locates within the project area. Now, instead of multiple locators working independently for each of those infrastructure owners on a public stream, you have one single coordinated approach, which means faster work, fewer delays, and far clearer communication. For DL model, it really shines on projects that are long-term, large in scales, or have complicated requirement. Think multi-year builds, right? Municipal-wide projects. Any environments where tight schedulings are coordinated are essentials, right? And it's not just project owners who benefits from this, it's the entire industry gains from this approach. By redirecting locate notification from the public stream, DL frees up resources, allowing infrastructure owners to relocate staff to other priorities, including improvements to mapping and data quality. Now, later on in this town hall, we'll walk through a real-world case study that demonstrates exactly how DL delivers value in construction, value in construction where environments or timing is safety and precision of all the needs to line up perfectly. That example will bring up a couple of these concepts to life and show how this model performs in the field. Okay. Now that we talked about what the dedicated locator is, let's quickly have a look at who's involved. And because DL project, it only works for when all four groups play their part. We look at the first round here is the project owner. Project owner really kicks off things. They submit the DL notices. They update us every 90 days. They cover the cost of the locates with the DLSP and the DL fee here. Now, the dedicated locate service provider, the DLSP. The DLSP is selected by the PO, which is the project owner, and listed on the DL notice. They coordinate with every UIO that are affected within the project area. They gather the mapping requirements of those infrastructure owner, complete the dedicated locator request within the 10 business days or whenever the timeline the project owner sets for them. So there's that collaboration aspect. Now, for underground infrastructure owners here, reviews and agrees to proposed DLSP. So you will be, if you do have access to your station codes at underground infrastructure owners or the DL contact here, you will receive a notifications when a DL notice is submitted. That's where you have that review and process. You provide mapping and any other infrastructure information that's required to complete the locate safely within the 10 business days receiving the DL notice in that sense. Now, the excavator here is the last and final one. So they're the boots on the ground. As part of the DL project, they submit their DL locate request 10 business days before the excavation. They work really directly with the DLSP for any additional needs, whether or not that's paint refresh, a site, a safety site walkthrough, and that's really important in there, as an added tool with having utilization dedicated locate service provider, or any site inquiries related to identifying underground infrastructure within your project area there. All right, now we've talked through the key players involved to the dedicated locator process. Let's shift gears to look at how the program has actually been performing. Adam, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Marco. So we often come back to this graph, and we've been building it over the last couple of years. We've got 3 years worth of the locate volume that we're seeing with dedicated locator here, from 2023 to 2025, so the end of last year. Now, what we can see here is what we did see in 2023 and 2024 was a trend of setting the projects up in January. So you see a bit of a flurry of activity, and then it builds up into the middle of the dig season, and then it eases off towards the December period. But it does keep going, and certainly we don't see the drop off to the extent that we do in the public stream with the locate request. We see the projects going year round. We saw that quite distinctly in 23 and 24, but what we saw in 25 was slightly different. And it shows how we're shifting in terms of the usage of dedicated locator. And what we see is the numbers are less in terms of the requests. But what we're seeing, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, isn't less usage of dedicated locator, is how the industry has shifted in the application of the model. And certainly what we saw in the early days of dedicated locator was the usage was through the government-funded designated broadband projects, where there was a mandate to use dedicated locator for the expansion of high-speed internet. And we did see that there was a real flurry of activity. This is obviously an area of the industry that moves thick and fast. We see teams that can cover up to 2 kilometers in a day of installation. That's an awful lot of locates, requirements and resources that are needed. But also there's multiple teams working in different areas and covering great areas and great ground in terms of installation work. So we saw high numbers of requests because there was massive movements and a need for the locates to be completed. In 2025, that was the tail end of the government-funded broadband initiative, and we saw a number of the projects being completed in 2024, and certainly more of those completed throughout 2025, which is where we see the number of requests come down somewhat. They're not the high impact projects that we're seeing out there like telecoms, but what we did see is some of the longer term, more complex projects, but more stationary projects. So that we're completing the locate, we're validating the locate, but there aren't the high number of requests going into those projects. But certainly we are seeing the usage in the industry expand into the areas of transit and developments, new developments and the like. So we're seeing less number of requests go through the system, but that doesn't necessarily match. And if we move on to the next slide, that doesn't necessarily match to what we're seeing in terms of who is using it and the number of projects.
And Adam, just to add on to that, I know before we move on to the next slide here, part of the usage here, we're seeing a lot more efficient ways of DL submission of locates. So we're seeing a lot more contractors that are under the DL model find ways, best practices to submit their locates now with the model of the dedicated locator, working with hand in hand with the dedicated locator service provider. So that's where we see the decrease of actual locates being submitted in, not because of the actual usages, but more refined locate submission in there and more efficient.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Marco. And what we do see is it's spread more throughout the year. And you see that although there is a little bit more of a peak through that dig season, it is pretty steady throughout the year, apart from your December, January period, where and February, short month, obviously. But those periods, obviously very cold, not a lot of work happening, but still some work happening on these projects. But throughout the year is pretty consistent. So as you say, there's a bit more of efficiency rather than a real flurry and impact of putting requests into the system. So if we look at 2025, We saw 2023, 22, 23, 24. We saw increases in the number of project owners, and then we saw a decrease in 25. Now, that isn't necessarily in isolation as a stat. It doesn't look a great stat, but what we actually saw again was a number of the telecoms. They had the government funded projects. They had major increases, more than perhaps they would have done without the government funding. And certainly they've reached a point of stabilization where they're not looking to have expansions at this time. Obviously, they've just completed major expansions. So a number of the telecoms companies left dedicated locator when their government funded projects completed. But what we did see is other companies come in at that time. And we saw that the project submissions, they were pretty stable between 23, 24, 25. So we're still seeing the projects being submitted into dedicated locator. It's just, again, not a massive influx that broadband brought in, but we're seeing a steady growth and a spread in a number of different organizations using this. But what we are seeing is the active projects that we are having ongoing at any one point is much greater. You can see from 24 to 25, there was quite a significant jump. And that's why we see the broadband where the projects, smaller projects, but happening very quickly, they're coming into the forefront. They're being installed and being completed and moved out. Those projects are not ongoing projects. Now we're seeing some of the more longer term projects. They're going on throughout the multiple years. And that's what we're seeing in 2025 and continuing into 2026. These projects are staying within dedicated locator, and they're seeing the model reap rewards with their projects. And we'll go into a case study in a little bit with Marco, and that's going to show some of where we're really reaping the rewards in the industry. What we have seen, urban to rural, continues to be mostly rural works. Again, a lot of that would have been the broadband influencing, and again, a lot of work has happened there in the past year as well. But we suspect that urban areas with the transit, the new subdivisions that are coming into dedicated locator, we'll see that shift a little bit in 2026. But certainly it is still something that is happening across the province. It isn't just isolated into any singular area in terms of where the projects are happening. So we like to show our heat map, and this is from the beginning of when dedicated locator came in 2022. And you saw it was in certainly urban centres to begin with, but then it really started to spread out. And now from Windsor all the way through to Ottawa, along the 401 corridor, and even up to Algonquin and the Golden Horseshoe, we're seeing a large amount of work. And certainly a lot of these areas are considered rural areas, but we're seeing dedicated locator has happened throughout the province here, and there's certainly some other areas to the north that have had some activity, a lot more limited because there's less work that happens there, but we're seeing it certainly across the province. And if you look at the companies that are involved in the lower right here, we have the project owners that have been ever present, the telecoms companies, and we've brought in some of the municipalities and hydro companies. But what we're starting to see now is more transit and new subdivisions and developments coming in to see the long-term projects being managed by the project owner as opposed to in the public stream. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mark, who's going to talk about some improvements that we saw in 2025.
Okay, thank you, Adam. All right, let's look back at 2025. It was a foundational year, obviously, for the dedicated locator program, a year where we didn't just maintain the momentum, we strengthened the model in some really meaningful ways. So let's just start off with, we started off the year with the full implementation of the dedicated locator portal. So what that is, this is a major milestone where we brought a portal to deal project information, requesting tracking, and workflow management into all in one place. And what that meant for everyone really is the project owner, the DLSPs, and all the internal teams. So all deal stakeholders really with greater visibility, cleaner coordination, and far fewer manual touch points. We saw fewer miss updates, better data consistencies, and smoother experience across the board since the introduction of the deal portal. Now we also introduced the additional of the legislation here under 6.1 of our subsection. So the Onus Act subsection 6.1 came into effect late in December 2024. With it, we strengthened our determination process for the cases where infrastructure owner requests a standard locate instead of the DL locate. This request usually comes from special circumstances, things with like insufficient mapping or have unique natures of their infrastructure or legitimate safety concerns. Our enhanced review process allows us to assess the situation quickly and fairly while still providing a clear path for the dedicated locator project to move forward safely and with confidence. Now, with that, we're also looking into the expansions across industry sector that Adam spoke of. So in 2025, we expanded the dedicated locator model beyond the traditional telecom space. We saw new adaptations from sectors that hadn't used DL before. This growing cross-sectors interest showed that the model isn't just working, it's scaling, and it's paving way for more diverse and complex project that benefits from dedicated locator moving forward. And last but not the least, we're looking at here are the DL datasets. In 2025, we advanced our DL datasets with also that's part of the introduction of our portal there, not just collecting numbers, but building meaningful insights by tracking year-over-year trends, adaptation patterns, project behaviors, and regional activities. We built a stronger foundation for smarter data-driven decisions heading into 2026. So those were some of the key improvements we made throughout 2025, a year where we strengthened the foundation of dedicated locator program. Now let's shift our focus to 2026, because we built last year's and set the stage for what's coming up next. So for 2026, now we're looking at 2026, our focus is building on the foundation we strengthened last year. These are the 4 key areas that we're pushing forward. So the first thing we're looking at here are continuing development of the portal itself, making it faster, clearer, and more intuitive as more DL stakeholders adapt to it, right? Second, we look at, more improving our internal tools and process to support better coordination, decision-making, and service delivery across the DL program. Third, we're preparing to increase the activities in transit projects. These projects come with higher complexities and tighter schedule, so supporting them effectively will have our major focus this year as well too. And finally, preparing to the launch of internal DL Locate Resource Pilot Program with the new initiative that will test ways to build capacity, strengthen training, and create scalable framework for the future of DL support and resources. Adam will speak more about this later in the town hall. Now, with all this together, these initiatives position us to deliver even stronger, more efficient, and more reliable dedicated locator program throughout. Now, before we move on to, we want to take this moment to highlight a new department here at Ontario One Call, the Business Solution Team. This group, it plays an important role in improving how we support the industry and give us a quick overview. And we're pleased to, introduce Kelly Kowalik, manager of our Business Solution here with us today. Kelly, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thanks, Marco. Hi, everyone. As Marco said, my name is Kelly, and I'm excited to share that we have started a new team at Ontario One Call, the Business Solutions team. So this team will identify and design innovative solutions that address organizational and industry needs that align with goals and overall user needs. The team will look to partner with internal and external stakeholders to ensure that any solutions that we have are practical, impactful, and user-focused. With that being said, the Business Solutions team at Ontario One Call is creating a public-facing, volunteer-based roster of individuals from across the excavation and locate ecosystem, which contribute to improvements and technology through processes, customer experience, education, and overall operational efficiency. This group helps Ontario One Call understand real industry needs, pressure points, and opportunities by engaging with the right experts. So you guys. And at the right time, our ad hoc group is going to be a really great opportunity. So as you can see, some of the reasons why you would like to participate in this group: a safer, more efficient user experience, improved visibility, increased communication, and understanding those industry needs for Ontario One Call. If you or anyone in your organization would like to participate, please scan that QR code. We're really excited for commitment and continuous improvement, innovation, and practical solutions that help build a collaborative network focused on driving better operations. I'll also include, or maybe it's already been included, but the link in the chat. So again, if you are interested or you have members at your organization who are interested to join this ad hoc type group, we would love to have you and learn from your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Okay, now moving on to the next part of our DL Town Hall, we want to explore the transit project and how the DL model can best support these type of complex build. Now, when we look at the transit construction, it is a highly complex and fast moving. These projects operate under tight schedules, strict contracts, and really very limited work window, especially around active rail system here. Now, that means, planning must be precise. The coordination across all discipline is essential to prevent any delays. Now, because rail operation and access rules are so restrictive, even a small disruption can impact the entire project. Now, safe work environments and predictable scheduling becomes absolute critical in this, in this kind of scenarios here. Now, this is why a strong locate process, particularly the DL model, are so important. This helps maintain safety, reduce scheduling conflicts, and keep construction progressing smoothly in these challenging transit environments. Now, the transit projects don't just look complex. They come with a whole set of challenges that can easily really derail the progress if they're not managed properly. So we're going to dive into the realities of teams that are facing out there in the field. Now, here's some of the here on the slide here, we're highlighting the common challenges that the transit work are becoming so demanding. We're talking about utility conflicts and major relocation delays, especially those in the crowded rail corridors. And remember, all of this is happening while crews have to maintain a live rail operations. That means really extreme tight work windows, strict controls, and absolutely no room for error. A single day delay doesn't just slow things down. It creates a ripple effects across multiple work streams, pushing schedules back and driving up costs, right? And because there's no work that can start without confirmed locates, any issues with locate process can leave an entire crew or equipment sitting idling in there. Now, to top that off, with tight rail corridors, complex structural interfaces, and in the constant need of enhanced safety around active tracks, you can see why transit project requires such careful planning and coordination. Now, these challenges are exactly why dedicated locator supports, the dedicated locator program really becomes a game changer in these kind of projects, not just for keeping a project moving, but also keeping them safe, predictable, and efficiency. Now that we have explored the broader challenges and really the opportunities within DL model, let's shift into the real world examples where this approach truly made an impact. This next section, we're going to look at the On Express, part of the GO expansion project, one of the largest, most complex transit initiative in North America. It's exactly the kind of environment that traditional locate process struggles under the scale, tight scheduling, and strict safety requirements. What makes this case really especially valuable is that On Express wasn't just dealing with large number. They were really dealing with rail corridors that are congested, heavily regulated, and extremely sensitive to disruption. Every single delay had a ripple effect. Every access window was limited. Every locate needed to be precise and coordinated. Over a few slides here, we're going to walk through how they move from a fragmented multi-team locating approach to a centralized dedicated locator model, and how that shift really improved their safety, productivity, and also overall project efficiencies in one of the toughest environments in the province. Now let's take a look at how that transition happened and what lessons came out of it. Now, let's briefly look at the scale of the project to understand why dedicated locator is essential for this. Now, the GO rail expansion here is one of the largest rail modernization effort in North America, transforming the entire GTHA rail system to the scope that includes, proposed electrification of the track, adding about 200 kilometers of new track, building new stations, grade separations, and major corridor upgrades. Now, the operations are enabled to two-way all-day services for this, so it makes improvements for, obviously our transit across the GTA here. This level of construction brings dense utility environments, strict access rule, and limited work window. I cannot stress that anymore. Huge consequences for delays, making precise coordinated locates are absolutely critical. So with this scale in mind, let's have a look at the initial locate process, what was functioning before the transition for them. Now, with the OnExpress early challenge, it is important to understand why locates are such a critical piece into a rail mega project. Rail corridors are extremely dense utility environment. So with close about 190 different station codes from our system here, maybe 70 plus utility owners are involved within just the alignment of the corridors. There are shared spaces within multiple rail operators, which means restricted work windows and constant coordination challenge. Now that stakes are very high: safety risk, strict access rule, limited flexibility, even the potential multi-million-dollar delays, and that's big if something goes wrong, right? All this means that accurate and timely and well-coordinated locates aren't just helpful, they're absolutely essential to keep this mega project like this moving safely on a schedule. Now that we understand the environment that they're working in, let's have a look at the state where OnExpress locate operation and why their original approach helped out in this way. So the initial states that they're going through here is that they had initially 6 full-time staff coordinating daily multiple locator companies. So when we say that, obviously in the public stream, there are multiple infrastructure owners and multiple LSPs that have to answer to these locate requests, all while dealing with limited track access and work windows that had to be booked 8 weeks in advance. And that's right. That's, want to stress that out because that number is going to be big. So just keep an eye. Remember that 8 weeks. So really the planning is 8 weeks ahead, but when you're scheduling, it's only 10 days in front where you're submitting locates. So, different firms were calling in locates at the same areas as well. Schedules were constantly disrupted by rail corridor rule changes. Obviously, things changes at any given point. Overlapping requests created major inefficiencies across the board. Ultimately, the system couldn't keep up with the scale and complexity of the program. Now, a more coordinated and centralized solution became more necessary for them. Now with that, OnExpress quickly ran into major pain points with the existing locate process. So just kind of covering up from the previous slide there, the first thing first was the scheduling was chaotic. The track access was only available at nighttime or a very narrow window during the daytime if that's the case, right? Because obviously everyone needs to get in and out of the downtown core or around the GTA. So during the daytime, that is most critical in that sense for the track to stay live. So the window at night is very important in that sense. So work had to be booked 8 weeks ahead, but locates were only submitted 2 weeks before excavation, from the system itself. So that mismatch created constant delay in that sense. They also had very little operational flexibility. So train schedules or the corridor rule changes frequently, meaning missing one of the nights of work could trigger 8 weeks worth of delay. 8 weeks, that's 2 months. That is your dig season in that sense. So that delay is massive for this project for just that one night. So let's put that into content here. Now with that cost as well too, costs escalated quickly. A single stop work week costs OnExpress roughly 100 plus K, right? That's one work week of stop time because of the delays that happened. Multiple teams were duplicating locate requests and creating even more of a gridlock to relieve that delay itself. So the cost just piles on in that sense. Just think of it, 100K of 1 week worth of delay. That's quite a few. That if you add that up to 8 weeks worth of delay, the numbers quickly rise up on that sense. So on top of that, the environment also carried a high safety and liability risk. So working in a corridor with numerous utilities, private rail assets, challenging terrains, and even the needs for field supervisors to have advanced locate reading skills, just to ensure that, what is on paper and what they see on site on the corridor could be two different things. So they need to have advanced locate reading skills at that point to understand these locates. These pinning points really made it clear that the traditional approach wasn't sustainable. Now, after experiencing a repeated delay, safety risks, and high coordination costs, OnExpress needed more of a reliable and predictable approach. So that's where they made the pivot to dedicated locator model. Now, this shift gave them the flexibility to schedule their DLSP before locates were even requested. So there's that coordination ahead of time. The DLSP is aware of it as well. And then when the locates come in, there's already a plan set in place. So that really eliminates the 8-week scheduling bottleneck. And it also ensured that dedicated availability, especially for night work, were more consistent where that mattered the most. Safety improvements as well. One locator working with the same corridor daily, hazard recognition, situational awareness increase. That all itself provides a safety aspect in the DL model, right? Now, instead of multi-team calling in overlap locates, only one coordinated locate was needed for shared areas, common areas that are being worked on. So which significantly reduced duplication and gridlock. Now, this decision was marked to the turning point that made the rest of the project workable. Now, once the dedicated locator model was selected, OnExpress moved on through a structured implementation process. And later on after this, we do have our guest speaker here. They will speak with this a little bit more in regards to what that structure is. So they really began with a hazard assessment, especially to confirm the viability of night work. And then, they established a joint alignment with their DLSP and coordination of that. Now, phase rollout started on Lakeshore East in September, supported by new internal structures with each JV team that had their own dedicated locate coordinator working with the DLSP in this case. Now, their DLSP schedules were consolidated across the teams, so with all supervisors across, receiving training how to read the locates and how to work with the DLSPs in the DL model. Along, also trying to implement in there some safety aspects, such as a pre-work walkthrough to ensure that every excavation started with full visibility and coordination. Now, this approach really built consistent, improved planning, and then set the foundation for a result we'll see in the next slide here. Now, after implementing the dedicated locator model, OnExpress saw clear measurable improvements. We'll go through that here. They achieved schedule stability, so no more of that 8 weeks delay from cancellations or any change events in that case. Night work became more viable and consistent for them with the coordination with their DLSP. Even disruption, like major events, were recovered the following week instead of derailing the schedule. So, one aspect of that during the Blue Jays World Series, there's major changes that had occurred during that time, especially for the live transit during that time, were to accommodate, the World Series for people coming in and downtown, in and out throughout, the span of 3 weeks. So that created delays on their end, but they were able to work around to that because of dedicated locator, where it would be an 8-week delay. It became more of a 1 week or 2 week delay, which is a lot more or less, right? They also realized significant cost avoidance by eliminating repeated shutdown costs. So that's very important, right? Shifting work from internal staff to the DLSP, so reducing overall liability exposure. So, and also we want to look at the safety performance improvement as well. There's that zero utility strikes. So they started off the project with zero utility strike, but they're continuing that on with better awareness and visibility with their DLSP. So they're tacking on top of that till this day. There's still zero utility strike within that corridor, within this project scope. Better infrastructure awareness, that's key in there, and also stronger documentation workflow. Last one we're looking at here is the coordination also became far more efficiency, avoiding duplicate requests across multiple contractors, multiple JVs working across the alignment itself, improving alignment with the utility partners, right? Dedicated locator bridge that gap between all stakeholders, whether or not you're an infrastructure owner, the rail corridor owners, or the project owner in this case, or the DLSP. There's clear alignment and communication across the board where collaboration will be very key at that point. Overall, the dedicated locator model delivered a sustainable, stability, safety, and efficient across the project. From the OnExpress, several clear lessons learned emerged. From the first, planning ahead is really essential. Utility agreements, approvals take far longer than expected in some scenarios, especially in this complex corridor. High utility complexity also means more coordination and more time, right? So always consider that planning ahead of time when you're, considering to put your project into a dedicated locator model. Centralizing locate management provided critical. With each project and JV team needed a dedicated coordinator, and because the industry knowledge of locate is often low in some aspect of the industry in this case, training supervisors became a key success for them in that, and also working with a DLSP with a proper workflow. Finally, pre-work walkthroughs, pairing the locate package, the excavator supervisor on the field, and the DLSP significantly reduce incidents by ensuring everyone started each dig with a full visibility. Now, this lesson shape how OnExpress approached the future work and also sets the stage for applying dedicated locator principles to other major infrastructure projects. Now, just to wrap things up here, now transit mega projects are unpredictable. We all know that here. The train schedule override project schedules. Delay stacks quickly. The most issues are outside the project's control. There's no all the issues are always external in these kind of projects. And in this environment, the dedicated locator becomes one of the controllable lever. It becomes flexible. There's trained and consistently coordinated support that comes along with the dedicated locator model. For OnExpress, that model transformed their locate operation from reactive and fragmented to proactive, coordinated and stable. It wasn't just a proactive upgrade. It was, it became a risk reduction strategy for them as well too. Ultimately, what OnExpress experience shows is what dedicated locator model isn't just an efficiency improvement. It is true risk reduction strategy, especially in complex transit corridors where so much of it is outside the project's control. With that in mind, we want to take this moment to hear directly from the people who have lived this work on the ground. So at this time, we'd like to transition into our guest panel discussion. For today, we'll be sharing our perspective for the case study here, lesson learned, and this model, what this means for large-scale projects. So for today's discussion, I'm pleased to introduce Susanna Nogueira, Assistant Project Manager of Ontario of OnExpress Transport Partners. We also want to introduce, at this point, Grace Mano, Manager of Dedicated Locator for ProMark. We also want to hear from you. So at this stage, feel free to use the QA function to type in your question or raise hand function to if you have any live questions. Okay, Grace, Susanna, how's it going today?
Good morning,
Here,
everyone.
thanks, Marco.
Let me just start by saying thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to be part of this case study.
Okay, perfect.
Same here.
Let's start this off. Let maybe just do a quick introduction of yourself here, Susanna. Let's start that off with you.
So I am working part of the OnExpress project. My team works directly with the designers so we can get information from the field to incorporate in the design. So we were the first team in the project to actually go on site and find all the constraints and eventually realize that this project, besides being a massive scale, it has very particular constraints that most projects don't, which is live rails.
Perfect. Grace?
I'm Grace Mano, Manager of the Dedicated Programs for ProMark Utility Services, and I work very closely with Susanna on the daily. My team and I work very closely with Susanna, and this has been an exceptional job site to be a part of, and very honored to be it.
Perfect. Now, Susanna, let's start off with the big picture here. What was the main driver behind OnExpress transitioning to, the internal locate process that you had initially before dedicated locator project came in place, or where you had this discussion with DLSP?
So our main goal, I think every project runs on two base things, which is schedule and cost. And cost drive schedules, and schedules drive cost. And for us, the fact that we can only book or gain access to site 8 weeks in advance make the schedule for us very difficult to manage. So, and having all of this, like all these companies that need to be on site to paint the utilities, but at the same time, I have the access constraint of a specific time frame, specific days where I have to have them on site. But if it's on the public side, you have to also have in mind that the locators are not available to you every time you want them. They have to be, manage their own schedule, their own works for other projects. So having that constraint of all these schedules to manage and have no flexibility on when I can access the site, it made me look for something else. We had to gain control of this in some other ways, since access is not controllable, since schedules for other companies are not controllable. We had to find ways to get some control somewhere of this schedule. Otherwise, we'll be running this project for eternity.
Yeah, that's exactly how I mentioned on that slide there. The control lever, how dedicated locator, that's really your only control lever in these scenarios, right? And I'm going to bounce that question to Grace here. When Promark came on board, what was the first foundational steps you focused on to get the DL program set up correctly for OnExpress with this such complex project?
Well, apart from all the contractual process that it involved, we directly dived into and focused on completing all of OnExpress and Metrolink's technical training and rail certification requirements in order to become fully compliant with the safety standards, as well as the shift reporting and documentation expectations that OnExpress and Metrolinks have in the field. We also connected with the DL team to get a contractor ID right away, and thanks to the Groundworks course, we were able to have some preparation for calling in accurate locates through the web portal. We coordinated and aligned with the joint ventures teams daily, sometimes twice a day. The more we connected to learn their business, the more it became a very smooth running process. So learning their business and asking the questions and gaining clarity is essential there. We also asked OnExpress for their forecast. So based on what they provided, we were able to put together a locate coordination team. So there's a person in charge of every aspect of the project, and we were also able to staff up the right number of dedicated locators for the program. All the while this is taking place, we're actively working with the UIOs, the affected utility owners, to make sure that we can make that process as smooth and efficient as possible, and ultimately go for that green light that we want for all of OnExpress's DLs.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of rolling pieces, which is key in the initial portion of the startup of a dedicated locator submission, right?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. All right, like Suzanne, I'm going to throw this in for you. Scheduling in the rail corridor, as we spoke about in the previous case study, is notoriously tight. What was the biggest pressure that your team faced, especially within those 8-week access window?
So usually the most intricate part of booking access to the corridor is be aware that you're not the only one working there. So if I want to work in a specific area, I have to make sure that no other project is working there. We have to follow the rules where I'm booking 2 miles away from any other project that runs. At the same time, things happens every day, right? So there's situations where I book specific work for locates in an area, so let's say area A, and then I get access to the west part of area A. And for the following week, I have access to the east part of area A for the actual dig, which doesn't match. So I always have to have like plan A, B, C, so I don't run into an 8 weeks delay. So when we had the locators coming, we didn't have a lot of flexibility. So we book those areas and that's it. But with a dedicated locator, we can be a little bit flexible. So the next week they can go again, right? It's not the same as booking locates directly with the public system. So this access, this T-8, or this issue that we have that we are not in charge of what miles are giving it to us, makes it very difficult to coordinate access without being sure that we're actually going to be doing some work.
Yeah, definitely. And I shared one of those scenarios that you and I talked about, but the Blue Jay World Series. I can just imagine, the
Yes.
complexity of that. It was maybe 3 week span or 2 week span worth.
It was, and it wasn't always predictable, right? Are they winning? Are they not going to win? Are they going to go back? Are they not going to go back? And then we are always on site, and instead of working from midnight to 5, we had to wait all the way to 2:30 when there's the last train passing, which is not normal. But the subcontractors are there, right? So, and then you wait. Okay, should I book for next day? Is he going to win again? So we have to take some sort of controlling some little things to make sure that we do something. And in this case, the Yale will give us a little bit in the middle of all this tight schedule that we have to work.
Perfect. Now, Grace, with that volume and multiple JV teams sending in requests, how did ProMark build a scalable, scheduling and coordination with the system?
Well, OnExpress and Susanna's team had some certain trackers in place that showed us the locations of their upcoming excavations and so on and so forth, track protection dates. So we took those trackers as well as created our own trackers. And among a couple of these trackers, we had it's one that records all the ticket information, every single ticket we called in, as well as monitoring expiration dates of all the utility locates that we've provided. With that, we worked with the teams to come up with a relocate process. So some of the teams want active locates constantly and some want only as per requested. So these trackers helped us greatly and are helping us greatly to make sure that we're on top of that and that every excavation team has valid locates in hands. And again, I've mentioned it before, continuous discussions with the JV teams, not only to learn and understand their project scopes, but also to learn their locate needs, what type of locates they require, the timelines, the processes to follow for relocates. From there, we mapped out all those requirements and put them into the customized workflows so we can monitor and handle any situation that comes our way in a very timely manner, keeping everyone digging and happy.
And I think I can say that for every subcontractor, having someone requesting work 8 weeks in advance. I think that's the only positive way of this 8 weeks in advance is that since I'm booking access to the corridor, I can give Grace a 8 weeks ahead planning of what I want to do, right? So it makes it easier for any subcontractor to have the resources ready if you are 8 weeks ahead providing this information. So that I will say that will be the only positive outcome of these 8 weeks booking access to site is to be able to provide to anyone who's going to be working for us 8 weeks requests and with everything that we need.
I'm going to just jump in here. Marco's having some technical difficulties.
Where did Marco go?
Yeah, his computer just froze and crashed on him. So I'm just going to kind of jump in here. I think there are a few questions. So why don't we actually, Sahar, I see that you have a question there. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, if it is about this particular case study. If you're able to unmute.
Hi. Hi, ladies. Grace and Susanna. I've actually worked with both of you and great working relationship. Susanna, I was also involved with the locating process from a WSP standpoint when we were working on the project as well. Pulled hairs with you both probably at one point or another in our careers. But yes, like honestly, when Marco started this discussion, I was like working along and then it perked my ears that OnExpress and the lessons learned. And honestly, I'm so happy to hear that there was a solution found because it was definitely hard going in 2023, 2024, that time frame just with the constant changes, the scheduling, all that stuff. And I'm happy to hear from a point where it's relatable that, dedicated locator does actually work. And because at one point, dedicated locator was just for those telecom projects. And we on the background engineering consulting, it didn't apply to what we were doing. So it's good. I'm taking away good lessons learned. Yeah, thank you for presenting this Ontario One Call. I'm so glad that we got a good result out of the On Express madness.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. I think, and I don't know if either of you want to comment on that as well, because it is something that we constantly see. People aren't necessarily sure when they see dedicated locator if it works for their project or not. But certainly once people get into using dedicated locator, they really do see the benefits, then they reap the rewards, and that's always a fantastic thing. And I don't know if either of you want to make any comments on that before I hand it back to Marco. I see he's present with us again, so he can carry on with the conversation. But I'll hand it back over to either of you if you want to make any comments to that same.
With respect to the dedicated locator, it does work. Been seeing it now for the past 5 years, more even prior to when it became official. We're there for you to take care of all your locate needs. So the DLSPs really know what to do and how to get involved, and takes that burden off of the project owners, all the while giving them more time to look at the project stats. How are you doing with your deadlines? Are you on time and on target? And leave all that dedicated locate stuff to the DLSP. We'll take care of it.
I think one of the things that we took out that it benefits a lot the company is actually the safety. So since we have a very particular field works, which is the train tracks, you cannot imagine the amount of training that we have to have for anyone who wants to access those tracks, right? So all Metrolinx trainings, all Canadian Rail safety operating rules that we have to learn. So to have someone, for instance, like a locator dedicated to our specific site. So one of the things that we did right away as soon as we have dedicators from Grace, dedicated locators from Grace, was to take them on site with us and do a hazard assessment. So they had to understand what the terrain is. They had to understand what is the constraints with trains passing all the time. There are specific bungalows where the utilities are connected inside the tracks they don't have outside. They are also utilities, private utilities, Metrolinx utilities, CN utilities running at the same time. So all of these locators, they had to learn what is the environment on the track to make it safe, right? So having someone that goes there frequently and learn and knows what is the particularly on that job, the particularities that you have to do to work around to have the job done safe, right? So it's not like a dedicated, like a locator who comes from on call that never been inside the tracks and suddenly they has to go and mark something because it's not frequent that you have a project inside the Go network. So they are new. For us, was always a little bit of an increased risk every time someone else goes from the outside. This case for us allow us to train them, to make them familiar with everything. So the safety on the job increase a lot. Like we see less near misses, less and more learning opportunities. We see a difference in safety aspects with the dedicated locator
So
program.
true. Having those same locators, even getting to know that staff, so true. You are so correct. And up to date, there's been 0 utility strikes across the On Express projects. And simply because our locators are there every day, they know what's going on. They make the right choices and decisions and keep everyone safe.
Yeah, so that was big for us, the fact that we could train the locators and they can have specialized trainings for this environment.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and certainly a number of different projects can realize those benefits in a number of different ways. But having that enhanced coordination when you've got so many moving parts in these larger projects, I think that's really important, and it does absolutely help build a safer community out there. So yeah, so that's fantastic, and that's a really great comment. So thank you for that. I'm going to pass back to Marco now. I believe he's back in the building. So over to you, Marco.
I'm back in the building. Yeah, I do apologize for the technical difficulties here. You guys can hear me loud and clear, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Now I'm going to take away that the safety discussion here, and I'm just going to continue that on. So I'm going to pass it on to Grace. With this complex projects and expanding from Toronto all the way to Hamilton, with over 60 plus utility owners, how did really Promark prioritize the outreach and ensure safe, accurate locates or safe, accurate field work is across the board that meets all the standards across all of those infrastructure owners, right?
Well, consistency is key, right? So again, maintain that ongoing community. Start right away with the utility owners the moment the deal opens. Maintain that communication and help them through the entire process. Be there to support them and take them right to the end, and comply with what they want. If they want a DSA, a service agreement, an NDA, whatever it is that they want, be part of a compliance program. Follow those requirements, and you'll see that the records will come to you right away. At the same time, we also talk to each utility owner and ask them what their best practices are for their locates when they're doing their own locates on their infrastructure. Then we adapt those same processes and procedures and we apply them to the field when we're locating on their behalf. It's all boiled down to the communication. Track your information properly, know where you left off, because it's not just 10 or 20 utility members, it's quite a few utility members. So you'll need to go back and forth each time, every day. So if you continue to be consistent in tracking, communicating, and utilizing your project owner as well as DL for support with any roadblocks, things should run very smoothly.
Yeah, definitely on that case, right? There's a lot of coordination, definitely across the board, and this is where we always speak of that DL really bridged that gap in between all stakeholders that are involved into this project, and it's really just a matter of utilization, utilization of that coordination, that transparency across the board, right? Susanna, now let's talk about a little bit of the cost lesson learned. Any industry advice here. So with going back to the cost impact are always a major factor, obviously, for these type of projects. How did the DL model compare financially once you factored in delay, stoppage, including what we spoke about about 100K a week of shutdown? Is a risk, right?
Yes, no doubt. Every time the job is stopped and we have subcontractors, they're just staring at trains passing. It can be costly, but I can look at this in two ways. We can have the direct cost, which is, like I said, you go there and you can't do anything because we are not the only ones working there. And usually on a night shift, we have to be aware that sometimes there's some maintenance, that someone broke something or the wind that broke a tree, and there's always maintenance to go. So sometimes you're there ready to go and maintenance comes and says, sorry, but we have to fix this first, right? So we have the direct cost, which is if I cannot do the work, I have 8 weeks ahead. So this flexibility to have the locators the next day changes a little bit on the cost for me, right? So that's direct cost. But then we also have the indirect costs, because we had a big team working before, right? We had multiple layers of training. So like we said, we trained the supervisors to read the locator so they can go on site, make sure they were like in the right spot and not hitting something, right? We had to train everyone. We had to make sure that these tickets were revised by at least 6 people before they go on site, because all of us were new into getting tickets and see all the details. They have to be in the certain areas where we want. We have to be the dates, the right dates, the right times. Like it was a very heavy workload in the office itself, right? So those are things that you cannot see right away because we just started working with Grace a couple of months ago. But I think in the long run, we will see these numbers, and there will be high numbers when we shift all these resources that we have just for the locates, just to review it, just to see if they were proper, just to make sure that we didn't hit something. So later on, we will see where all these resources came into play and how can we allocate them somewhere else. So that will be an indirect cost that I cannot see right away. But just the fact that we don't have a subcontractor charging us $100,000 to stare at trains all night, it's something.
Yeah, and then based on your experience there, really, what are the lessons should other major projects similar to this keep in mind as they consider adopting the DL model?
So I think the number one is time. Because like we were saying, there's a big number of companies involved, right? So all of these companies, we want to talk to the company, which is in the case Promark. We want to talk to them. We want to make sure that they have the right agreements, the right maps. They know what they are doing to make sure they mark the utilities properly. So when you have these 90 days in your system, it's a guideline, right? So give yourself at least another 90 on top to make sure that you have, depending on the magnitude of your project, right? So we will have companies from Oshawa to Hamilton and all the way to Barrie. So there's a lot of companies who wanted to talk, who wanted to have agreements, who wanted to share maps. Yep. So they will take time, right? So the first one that we were able to greenlight, it was from May to September, right? But the last one, it took us 9 months all the way to January. So it's not exactly 90 days. So give yourself time. Do not book, oh, let's start in 90 days, because that's not going to happen. It's a lot of companies. Unless you're a small project, it probably will happen. But otherwise, no, just give yourself time. We need time to get all of these people on the right side and on the right track.
And then speaking on our side of things here for the dedicated locator team, feel free to reach out to our team at any given point, right? Whether or not you're starting within that 90 days or you're looking, forecasting a year ahead, communicate that with us, because we have the knowledge, we have seen the experience through multiple DL projects, how these things could model in and will be your best path. So definitely, this is something that you can utilize our team for. Plan ahead with our team. We can help you out and walk you through that in that sense, right? And how to submit the project in a timely manner to the requirements that you need, right? Grace, do you want to add on anything in regards about lesson learned about this, some of the things that you want to advise regarding major, mega projects like this, how to, stay on top of things, and how, maybe other DSPs or even infrastructure owners that you work with to get things streamlined, right?
Again, I'm going to begin with start right away. Once that DL comes out, get in contact with the affected utility members right away, or utility owners right away, and be consistent with that communication and follow through with their requirements. The moment you do and finish what they want, what they need, you're going to get that mapping, and you can start doing your training internally for your locators. Also, you said it a couple of times, Marco and Susanna, but I'll say it again, work with DL, the team at DL. Yes. They are there as a great resource. They're there to help us out. And bring in the project owner. I've brought Susanna in multiple times to assist me with utility members, and it was just probably about clarification stuff, mapping questions, right? So once Susanna took care of those, we saw it progressing and moving in the right direction. Set up weekly touch points. Have this meeting with your clients, with your project owners. Yes.
Open lines of communication right away.
Open those lines. Together. Exactly. And create shared workspaces. Those are very valuable. Yes. We upload everything into a shared workspace. They can, grab paperwork, review old stats from trackers. Those trackers, make sure you have them. Record your ticket information, record the expiring date, so you can stay on top of all those pain points for your project owner. And literally just, for Susanna, we tell her, you're good for the next 30 days. We'll update in 2 weeks. Proceed with your dig. Call us if you have any questions, or see you next week on our call. So communication.
Yeah. Perfect. Especially in this project, and that is because we are here because of the Ontario On Call, right? But in our site, we also have the utilities, the private utilities from Metrolink. So even now, like Promark has to go and do everyone else and make sure that Metrolink's assets are also present, or CN assets are also present. And we have these particular companies who work inside the corridor. So open line of communication with all of these stakeholders, it's very important to make sure that they're all there when we need them.
And aligned.
Those are really very important messages in there. Now, I thank you both. We'll be time vigilant here. Now, your insight was really help clarify why the dedicated locator model is becoming more important for larger, infrastructure heavy projects, and especially this mega project that you guys are dealing with now. So I really appreciate your time here. Now, we do have several questions here in the Q&A sections. Those are some of the general questions that we do have some time at the end of this session of our town hall that we'll go over with. If there's any questions that we missed, particularly for this group, for Susanna or Grace, we'll follow up with you guys afterwards. But Grace, Susanna, once again, thank you for your time, and we'll move on to our next session here for our town hall.
You're welcome.
Okay, Adam.
Perfect, Marco. Okay, so I'm just going to give a bit of an update on a pilot project that we've been running in the Ottawa area. It started in 2025 and it'll be continuing to 2026. And that's about the use of internal locating resources. So not using a third-party locator, but using the internal resources as part of the construction company. And certainly you see up there are three pillars that we really entered into this discussion with the excavators or the project owners in this situation and the underground infrastructure owners. And we brought them all to the table, but we really wanted to understand the needs of the industry at large, because it's the needs of an internal locating resource are very different than a third-party locating resource for both the excavator and for the underground infrastructure owner. We wanted to, as a group, collaborate on a solution so that everyone could be successful, and ultimately we wanted to build a pathway to successful usage of that internal locating resource. So the conversation started early in 2025, and it was primarily with the National Capital Heavy Construction Association and a couple of their members, and the underground infrastructure owners in the Ottawa region, some of the larger owners of underground infrastructure in that area. And we launched this pilot project to try and bring everyone to the table, have those open discussions about the needs from all sides, and to try and find those solutions and build that pathway as I discussed. So if we go on to this slide, so what was the purpose? We wanted to address the gaps that we saw. It was relatively easy to bring in a third-party locating resource. These are generally the locating companies, LSPs, that are already locating for the high-risk infrastructure owners. And they already have the model set in place, the agreements set in place with a large number of the owners of underground infrastructure throughout the province. So having that transition over to those LSPs was a relatively easy step, not always straightforward at times, but a relatively easy one. But to take those internal locating resources, there was a gap there. We knew that we needed to build that pathway and develop those locating capabilities within these project owners. So one thing that we looked at is to build the safety performance, obviously enhancing the communication and the coordination. We spoke about that in the case study just a few moments ago. By having all of those moving parts coordinated in one location, it does help us build a safer platform on which the construction industry can continue working on. But to do that, we needed to standardize training and the onboarding. Obviously, again, as I say, the third-party locating resources, they already had these steps in place. But for internal locating resources, new resources to the industry, although those actual locators might have some wide experience of locating, but to bring those organizations into that locating role, that was a new and an extra step that we had to take. And with so many different parties approaching that from a number of different angles and a number of different conversations, we were seeing that there was issues coming into the forefront in trying to get those projects up and running. So bringing everyone to the table was really important to get those standardized steps and stages up and running for this to be successful. And ultimately, we were looking to reduce those bottlenecks and support those internal locating resources to be able to use dedicated locator. So some of the key areas for the project, for the pilot, sorry, was a unified development of standards. As I say, we needed to, as a group, a large group, an industry, move forward in a singular direction rather than everyone trying to tackle it from different directions, different conversations. How does the training requirements look for everyone? And we've tried to approach this from a framework in the past, but certainly it's something that we've struggled with as an industry to get everyone in alignment. But the attempt here was everyone at the table. How does the training requirements look? How do the audit requirements look? If there are contractual needs, and I see there are some questions that we'll go on to shortly, how does that look? Because obviously that's outside of Ontario One Call's purview. But how do we tackle these conversations? Let's tackle it as a group, and let's find those steps going forward and building that framework for everyone to build that enhanced stakeholder coordination. That was a key part of this. The setup from the very beginning, those very first conversations, was very important so that we can continue to realize success as we go along with this project. So we wanted to obviously build a scalable approach to this and take it on as a project. And we've got a number of excavators involved or project owners involved, and we're bringing on scalable projects as we roll it out throughout this pilot project entirely. And we will be building up the resources with these different project owners. And so we wanted to take it from, you know, a step at a time and build it out so that we ultimately can have it rolled out across the regional area. And we wanted it to be predictable. So we wanted to make sure that we covered all of our bases so that as we continue to move through the stages that are required for these dedicated located projects to be rolled out, that we knew what we had coming up. We've got good experience on how we can go through dedicated located with third-party locating resources. We can rely on some of that experience, but now we need to transition it across to internal locating resources, which is, it does have its nuances. So those are the areas that we've been challenging the industry to find those solutions with. So what did we want in terms of a long-term impact and value for the industry? Well, certainly we want to get insights from this pilot project. And with that, we obviously want to build the resources, make sure that what we're setting the industry up for is for success, not just for today, but for the years in the future and for the dig seasons in the future. It is something that we want to make sure that it's achievable across the industry at large. So we've got to take those insights and build upon those going out further with other industries, other areas. And that's why we want to look at a province-wide impact of this. So how can we take this pilot project in the Ottawa region and how can we roll that across the province so that, again, other excavating organizations or companies are able to use the dedicated locator program model with internal locating resources, because there is absolutely benefits from using third-party locating resources, but not all excavating companies can use those at all times. For whatever reasons, they need to use internal locating resources, or that is the preferred method. So we need to open up and find a route through with that. And ultimately, we keep talking about this. I mentioned a minute ago, the coordination and the safety improvements are absolutely there. We're getting that feedback constantly, and we heard our panelists earlier talk about those benefits, and we want to continue to improve those. And the best way we can do that is setting these projects off on the right foot, making sure that the expectations from day one and the requirements are already in place so that we can get up and running and these projects can flow, and they're not flowing with, you know, stop start and delays and things like that. And ultimately, we want the industry to move forward in a modern, collaborative way. Certainly, Dedicated Locator have brought a number of parties together, and there's more conversation happening than ever before. And that's a really important step. But we need to continue to build these conversations, bring people to the table, and have those standards set, those needs and requirements clearly communicated across the industry so that we can set these frameworks in place, and those who want to use dedicated locator have the ability to do so, whether they are third-party locators or internal locating resources. And certainly what we have seen from the pilot so far, although it is still early days, we're looking to roll out the first set of projects in the coming weeks and months. But certainly what we are seeing is a much more solid foundation on which we are building the internal locating resource route for dedicated locator. And the collaboration has been really great. And I thank everyone that's been at the table, from NCHCA, their members, and the UIOs, because certainly what we are seeing is a really great drive forward and a real buy-in from everyone to make sure that what we see is a brighter future in terms of those who want to use the model. It becomes available. So that was just a quick highlight, and hopefully at our next town hall, we're going to be able to give some more insights into what this pilot project is bringing forward. And certainly in the future, we look to roll this out across the province, but it is really important that we continue to drive this forward. We're seeing greater adoption, more sectors of the industry using dedicated locator than ever before, and more desire to use it. And those that are using it are definitely reaping the rewards, as we're hearing from the project owners. And you know, UIOs are seeing benefit on their side as well. So we need to continue moving forward and finding this stabilization in the industry so that we can continue to build upon the success that we've had. With that, I'm going to bring Marco back on, and we're going to open it up for the general Q&A for anyone that would like to know any more about dedicated locator or have any questions.
Okay, perfect. Cheryl or Sophie, do we have any questions that from the Q&A that we can answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a couple questions in QA. I can start that off. And we do have a hand raise, so we will get to that. So the first question here, as a UIO, underground infrastructure owner, I have a contract with my LSP company and have stipulations on credentials in the contract. Now with DL, how do I know what credentials they have for locating for me?
So I'll start it off with that. Really, for say, is that when you receive the DL notice, the information for the DLSP is included to that. So there it comes with the contact information, their email address, who will be dealing with it from the dedicated locator service side of things. Key thing is reach out. Either you would initiate the reach out, or they already have probably established a reach out to you. Those conversations are very important. So lay out what what structures you currently have, what requirements you have, if there's any additional training is required. In this case, that's where the conversation is between the DLSP and the infrastructure owner to lay it out all on the table to what's required to move forward with this. So in most cases there, obviously, with the DLSP, they can put forward who those resources are assigned for those particular project. If there's any requirements and such, then that's something that you can request from them and review in that sense. But I just truly encourage you to have those conversations with the DLSP, right? It wouldn't be through Ontario One Call. Yes, we can bridge that gap for you. We can mediate some of the calls in that case. But really, the initial start off with is have that conversation with that DLSP to get the knowledge that you require from them and get that comfort to start off with. Adam, did you want to add on anything to that?
I think you covered all the key components of it, really. But the communication, it absolutely is key, and we need two-way flow of that information. So if you want to know something, ask the question, quite simply. But yeah, certainly when we look at contracts and agreements, it is outside of Ontario One Call's realm, but certainly if you want to set standards or if you require certain things, that's where it would go, is in those contracts or those agreements between the parties. But yeah, certainly it usually starts with a conversation. The locating companies always have this information at hand, so if you ask the question, I'm sure it's always met with the right answer that you're looking for.
Thank you. We do have another question here as well. So as a UIO, I'm curious on how the accuracy of DLs are being tracked and audited. For example, we completed an in-house audit post-DL and discovered that the completed DL marks were outside of compliance requirements, and this was on a critical transmission water main. This was flagged via email to both the dedicated locator and One Call with no response. What does Ontario One Call suggest for communicating accuracy concerns with dedicated locators?
It's a really good question there, and then just kind of tracing back again to Adam's comment there previously, with the realm as such, if there's any special requirements of getting the copy of the locates or any audit requirements, that is really a discussion between the DLSP and the infrastructure owner. That could be also laid out through a service agreement that could be put in place. So those are all critical in that sense that Ontario One Call doesn't oversight on. So that's definitely a conversation to have with the LSP. If this is something that, if the locate was deemed, inaccurate in that sense, reach out to that LSP. A correctional matter could be put in place immediately. But once again, the communication is set forward to the LSP. Just think of it this way. They are just similar to your in-house locator or your third-party LSP, is the same way you would treat them as well too, for this sense, or whatever requirements that you have from them, whether or not it's through audits or standards of the locate itself, or any corrective action that needs to be completed based on the accuracy of the locate itself. So definitely the information should be into the main contact with the DLSP to make sure that that is seen, that those actions are towards to that. At the end of the day, we're looking at it as in a safety aspect. So, to start that off, it's really just communication with that LSP, and I'm certain that corrective actions could be made in place in that sense.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I just wanted, sorry, Cheryl, just to jump in very quickly. I do want to address the section there as well, that an email was sent to Ontario One Call. I'm not sure where it was sent. I apologize that it went unanswered. That's not obviously what we're aiming to do. So certainly if an email comes in, if it went to DL and you, Marco and myself, we're also available via email as well. So if an email goes unanswered, please do escalate it, because we don't want those emails to get lost. We don't want those questions to get lost, and certainly we want to be having those conversations so that we can put everything back on the right track. So apologies that it went unanswered, but please do follow up. We're always happy to have those conversations. We want to make sure everyone's on the same or on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. The next one in the chat here, we have, as a UIO, I do share similar concerns with dedicated locators. The contracts that DLs provide are varied and range from 100% accountability for poor locates to zero accountability. Can Ontario One Call work to mandate a standard DL contract for transparency and consistency?
So with that, we did work with several sectors of the industry to create a draft agreement. Some are being used or circulating around there, but taking over, once again, going back to Adam's comment there, that we don't oversee what the master service agreements are in place and such. And this is something that on our hands, we really just there to mediate the conversation between the parties. Some could be just a simple coordination or a simple mediation discussion between ourselves and the parties involved to it. Once again, in my experience through this, a simple phone call or a simple mediation call between the parties really fixes that, the gap in between the contractual agreements that you guys may have a pinning point to. Adam, do you want to add on anything to that?
Yeah, it is something that we, as you say, we did try and work with the industry to find a bit of a standardized agreement, but it is very difficult because this is an industry of many industries, and gas company isn't the same as the telecoms, which isn't the same as the municipality. So the underground infrastructure owners all have different needs. So the locating companies, obviously, there's some similarities there, but certainly once you start to have those conversations, it does get a little bit complicated, and finding a standard across the industry at this time, it wasn't possible. But certainly there is some guidance and a lot of experience already out there. So yeah, having those conversations, that's the key. Just have those conversations, and again, the DL team is here if you want to ask those questions, and I'm sure they can point you in the right direction to have those conversations.
Okay, perfect. We're coming around the clock here. We'll answer the raise hand. I believe, is it Sarah? You have a question on hand, and then from there on, we'll wrap things up. And once again, if we didn't go through your question, feel free to reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you directly if some of these questions here to provide you some of those answers. But I do appreciate the questions on hand there. Sahar, do you have a question there? Yeah.
Yeah, about the dedicated locator. Do they also have agreements with parties that are not part of the Ontario One Call members, like say the MTO or like any of the rail authorities? Do they work with them, or are they still completely different entities?
So with that,
do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, actually, great. Go ahead.
So in our case, we do have particular utilities for the landowner, right? Like we have Metrolinx utilities and we have CN utilities, and those utilities, they cannot be done by anyone else besides the company that the landowner assigned them to. For instance, we have contracts with P&R, which is the only company assigned to handle Metrolinx utilities for the areas that we are, right? So Grace had to contact directly P&R and include that as, let's say, a utility owner, right? Not through dedicated locator, like a private utility owner, right? So they will deal with everything. I guess will depend on the contract you have with your assigned dedicated locator. You may want to take on yourself to have the private ones, right? But for us, we'll establish with the company and we say, hey, take over everything, private and non-private. I did provide which ones are the private ones because after all, I am the owner of the project, so I will know which ones are the privates. I assign them, but they have a whole full package. So whatever is private on the side, you can decide how you want to go about it.
And those processes went smoothly, by the way, Sahar, just so you know. There weren't any roadblocks and we were able to pick up their services right away.
Good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add, I think that was a great answer and certainly answered the question pretty fully. Different projects are approached in slightly different ways, and certainly we find that out at the beginning. But again, those are the things that having those conversations, setting yourself up appropriately in the early stages, going into this understanding what you can and should be looking at. Those are the key stages, and utilizing the experience already out there. You know, Grace has spoken about how they go about things at Promark, but there's a lot of experience out there. We've been doing this for a few years now, and we've been through most scenarios. So certainly speak to the industry, speak to the dedicated locator team, and ask those questions, because it most likely is a situation where we've been through scenarios very similar to what you're looking at with the setup of your own product. And certainly the dedicated locator team here at Ontario One Call is a fantastic resource. They've got a lot of knowledge. They've helped so many projects get up and running, hosted so many conversations between different partners and stakeholders in the industry. And I would absolutely recommend that you have a conversation with them if you're looking to use dedicated locator. If you're an underground infrastructure owner and you're trying to set your end up and the projects up and your agreements and all of that, understanding what's required under legislation, have those conversations. The team absolutely can help you understand what's required and the route to go in. And again, we want to make sure that everyone's set up for the right journey through these models. So please do include us in those conversations. As Marco said, there are a couple more questions. We apologize, we haven't gone to them. We've already gone over time, and I've seen a number of people have had to leave already. So we're going to finish it there, but we will happily have any conversations if people want to reach out to us. The email address is up on the screen, or you can give us a call, or we can set up a meeting. Absolutely happy to have those conversations in the future. But thank you very much for attending the webinar today. I hope it's been an insightful conversation. Thank you to our guests for speaking about their experiences, and thank you for the questions that have come in. Again, please reach out if you have any questions or would like to understand dedicated locator more in the future. And I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your day. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.